Fill my wounds with molten gold and make me whole again. Aisha's Embrace, Destiny 2. The Daily Grind, Chapter 186. There was a certain weary, demoralized collapse that occurred in places like strip malls that James had never been able to fully articulate. Sometimes they were okay, especially ones that had a certain amount of overlap with courtyards and restaurants and such. Downtown streets where there were apartments built over small businesses also tended to avoid the process. But the majority of copy-pasted strip malls that he had experienced in the United States would, inevitably, trend toward decay. Not even a lack of maintenance or a lack of business, but a more psychological decay, something twisted and collapsing in the emotional space that overlaid on the physical. Small exhaustions amplified larger and larger until there was nothing left but a dry, soulless zone of pure commerce and no humanity. Lots of parking, though. These were spaces where people arrived, made purchases, and left. No one enjoyed being there. No one lingered. No one met friends. You didn't have a favorite memory from the grocery store or a faint historical fondness for the mass-market casual clothing outlet. People got in, got their stuff, and got out, and tried not to think about how empty it was. Unless, of course, you were here to meet someone in a public place, for the purposes of opening a diplomatic channel, which sounded like a euphemism for a drug deal, and often probably was, but not today. This strip mall was one big circle, with shops on both sides, which was a great way to make traffic in the central parking lot a living hell. One side faced outward with your usual massive grocery store, flanked by an omnipresent Starbucks, a couple small restaurants, a place that sold lawn ornaments, and a half-dozen other small businesses all doomed to failure. On the other side of the parking lot was another row of mostly restaurants with a few businesses mixed in, great for if you wanted lunch and to get your taxes done, or file an insurance claim while you waited for pizza. That space had a little courtyard in the center of it, with a tall clock tower and a scattering of old wrought iron tables, before you would come out the other side to the other half, dominated by a movie theater. It was a lot going on, really. It was also mostly entirely empty on this dismal Wednesday afternoon. Gray skies threatening to drizzle, but not full-on rain, a scent on the air like wet sand, only a fraction of the parking lot occupied, and a clammy feeling just from being outside. James was wondering if maybe, just maybe, they'd picked a slightly less public spot than he had actually expected. 2 days ago, a small group of Order Knights had started putting together a plan. Method of contact, team roster, contingencies, escape routes. 2 plans, both as simple as they could make them, one for non-violent contact and resolution, one as a fallback for failure. The Order had a lot of resources at its disposal. Not on the level of a military, or even a major city-sized police force, really. Response wasn't actually doing the job of every aspect of the police they were trying to obsolete right now. They just had the advantage of selection and teleportation. But that didn't mean the Order didn't have 100 tricks up their collective sleeves, and their initial plan worked to leverage as many as possible into an overwhelming advantage when needed. 1 day ago, James had spent some time in Officium Mundi. Nothing serious or strenuous, just something to keep his brain distracted and rearrange his sleep schedule so he'd be awake properly for this. He had gotten a skill rank in a blueberry strudel recipe, among other things, which was probably going to be his highlight of the week. He'd also accidentally cracked an orange orb, which had netted him an associate's degree in interior design, which would not be the high point of his week. This morning, he'd woken up in the Lair's residential basement, detangled himself from Anesh and Alana, who were also waking up, gotten dressed in the outfit that had been assembled for him to be as nondescript as possible, and blearily made his way upstairs to sit in the dining area, mostly by himself, and pretend that a Nutrigrain bar and water was breakfast. And then he settled in to wait for the rest of the team to collect themselves. It took him some time to shake off the feeling that he was a teenager about to get on a flight for a family vacation at too early o'clock. The presence of teleportation made this much easier, really. The presence of Nate giving the group their last-minute refresher on orders helped too. Karen and Alana should be the only ones to make contact, Nate said. Specifically, Karen. Alana, you're the muscle here. Listen, keep alert, be eyes and ears for everyone in the link. Don't talk to them. Let them think you're stupid. Nate's orders were dry and clinical, a mechanical process, the definition of nothing personal. Team 1. He turned to Sarah and James. One of the two of them, the one who wasn't James, saluted him energetically. You'll be going in a half hour ahead of time. Get lunch, settle in. You're on a date and you're not important. Fade away, don't engage, unless explicitly told to. Use the glasses, people watch, check everyone. Got it? Lunch, spy things, pretend I'm fawning over James. Got it. Sarah snapped her fingers, leaning over to drape herself across James's shoulders. I kinda... James started to protest, and then paused and let the sentiment die. Yeah, right, sure, he said with a chuckle. Petition to change our name from Team 1 to Team Romance. No. Nate turned away to look at a larger chunk of 9 people sitting around in more obviously dangerous gear. Team 2. You all have your squad positions, rooftops and skies. Stay in pairs. Your job is to look for anything obvious coming at us. Call it out. Again, don't shoot anybody unless I tell you. Stay out of sight. Dave, keep Pendragon as high as she can go. Got it? Nods and reliable looks met him. Team 2 was a mixed team. Camercondas and humans, and 1 dragon. They were the backup. In case things went wrong, they were the ones who would be coming in shooting. Team 3, on site within a half mile of the Alchemist's home base, Nate said, repeating what everyone already knew, just to make sure. Team 3 was actually just a response team, mostly made up of people who had been, and kind of still were, Nate's prep cooks in the back kitchen. You do nothing unless we verify there are hostages. Anne nodded, cracking her knuckles. Got it, boss, she said. Next to her, knife and fangs made a mechanical hiss. Understood. Last up, Team 4 stays here. Nate nodded once at Anesh and Reed and a few other research members. In the event that any one part of this goes to hell, you're here to cover our exit. Don't... Reed cut him off. Don't do anything unless ordered? He asked, almost cheekily, which mostly got Nate to glare at him until he relented. We won't do anything until ordered, he quietly said, sinking back down in his chair. Good, Nate snapped. Teams 2 and 3 leave in an hour. Team 1, hour 30. The meeting's in 2. Any questions? There were none. Everyone double-check everything you can. We'll deploy out of the briefing warehouse. See you then. An hour of helping Alana fit her bulletproof vest on, flicking through Skulljack protocols, listening to Karen rehearse her speech, and generally trying not to have an anxiety attack later, and James was in Utah again. The last time he was in Utah, someone had tried to blow him up, twice, before he'd redecorated a wall with his attackers. So far, this time was going better. Mostly because he and Sarah were sitting in that little courtyard outside a restaurant called the Ham House, which had been a powerful enough name for James to become amused and not really lose the feeling, even as he knew they were creeping closer to the appointed time. You know, James said, as he rapidly drummed his foot on the brickwork ground of the courtyard in a nervous staccato. Having lunch is a different experience like this. What, overpriced but dressed up as middle class? Sarah asked, picking at the salad she'd ordered. It had, unsurprisingly, strips of some kind of smoked ham in it. James rolled his eyes. You know what I mean, he challenged. Yes, but we can't talk about it, Sarah reminded him with a sly smile. We're on a date, after all. Romance, James. Narrowing his eyes, James focused as best he could and split his attention. Tuning out the noise of a semi-truck backing up in the winter chill, he pulled a trick he'd been working on with Anesh and Alana and spoke out loud while at the same time saying something different through the Skulljack link tucked under the scarf he was wearing. Right, romance, he said out loud, while through the mind machine interface he sent to Sarah, just let me know if anybody walks by behind me. Ooh, that's neat, Sarah said cheerfully. How'd you do that? Years of Zen training? Orbs. James drew the word out with a vibrating tone of voice, getting a laugh from his friend. There, see? Humor. Classic date stuff. The motion of someone walking behind Sarah across the courtyard caught his eye, and he pinged her across the link as she laughed. Hang on, checking someone. Make small talk. While Sarah said something out loud that James didn't process, but was probably more relaxed than he would be, he looked past her and focused on the other person with the office-procured glasses he was wearing. The floating note of Sarah Moyle, Order of Endless Rooms, Night, blinked out as he looked over her shoulder, trying to focus just enough to get the glasses to trigger, but not enough to draw the other person's attention. Richard Daniels, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Bishop, was what he got from the man walking past rapidly with his head down, carrying a nondescript tote bag. Okay, probably nothing, James said, turning back to Sarah. Unless the Mormons are... No, actually, I don't want to finish that thought. That's right you don't, Sarah snorted at him. Don't make me into a... heretic? Apostate? One of those is probably correct. James took a light sip of his drink, following Nate's very explicit command to not drink too much and end up needing to use the bathroom mid-combat. Sorry, I'm just jumpy. Sarah shrugged. I mean, I get why, but we've still got half an hour to go or so. This place is just flat out empty, so I'm going to enjoy my date. It's been actually years since I've had an actual date, and I love everyone in the order, but it's not the same. Shit, we didn't really talk about this much. I feel bad for not asking. Were you in a relationship before... James made a kind of circular gesture with his hands, struggling to convey the phrase dungeon kidnapping with interpretive dance. Sarah stuck her tongue out and made a dismissive sound. Nah, I actually... Her cheeks had a hint of red creep in, which got raised eyebrows from James. Sarah was kind of the least embarrassed person he knew, in general. I'd been going to ask Alana out, she said. Just, see how that went. James glanced away, partly not wanting her to see his grin, and he instead watched somebody ordering their own lunch through the windows of the nearby food place. Michael Holt, Rainy Day Insurance agent. James shook his head at the man's misfortune and looked back at Sarah. You know you're absolutely still allowed to do that, right? He asked her. Heh. Sarah shook her head with a sad smile, looking down at the folded arms she had on the table. I don't know. Everything's gotten weird, and it's great and all, but maybe dating while I don't know if I'm going to be in another life or death or next week is a bad idea. Also, I don't want to step on your toes. We're friends again, and that's great. I don't want to mess your life up. Also, actually, is Lana not straight? I didn't really want to ask, but since we're here... This is a great lunch. My date is asking me about other women. James hummed to himself, scanning a woman pushing a stroller past the mouth of the courtyard into the parking lot. Sarah, you're the most... You are the most person I know. I don't know how to say that better. Just ask her. But I'm also pretty sure Alana's sexuality is kind of like a hurricane, unconfined by human conventions, but also sometimes like an incredibly embarrassed hurricane, which is adorable and also causes property damage. You're either perfect for each other or terrible for each other, so just ask. Just ask. You're a really good friend and terrible at advice, Sarah told him. At the same time, she sent through the skulljack. On your 6. James grinned as she picked up that trick almost right away. Raising his arms over his head in a stretch, he twisted himself around to reach down and rustle through one of the pockets on his coat, which was hanging over the back of the chair, vision briefly flicking over the heavily tattooed woman in a thick bomber jacket that had taken a seat a few tables away from them and was reading a local newspaper acquired from one of those standing plastic bins. His grin vanished as his glasses supplied him with a name and a title. Violence Melody, Harlan's Wolf Pack, Enforcer. James slapped the smile back onto his face with an enforced emotion as he turned back to Sarah, opening up his link to the rest of the group. James sent out an alert. Hey, we've got someone here from that group Nate ran into that took the chemical plant dungeon a few months back. He relayed the woman's name and a memory file of her appearance as he had seen her before his brain mixed it up too much. Do we call this off? Hold on. Nate's dry, professional message came back to him. The two of them waited, seconds seeming to creep like hours. After a couple bites of salad that lasted roughly one epoch, Sarah cocked her head to look past James, on purpose, and then turned back to him. I like her hair, she said in an effortlessly casual voice. What? James startled out of his tense waiting. That girl's hair, Sarah said, and James saw through their shared video link that the girl in question, the enforcer in question, flicked her eyes up from her paper towards Sarah and then the back of his own head. It's cool, purple and sparkles and stuff. I should get hair like that. James let slip a laugh bordering on giggle that surprised him as he made the noise. Hey, maybe ask her out, he suggested. Bet she'd share her hair secrets. Now that's a plan, Sarah tapped her chin. Almost a good plan. That's a terrible plan. You already know I give bad advice. Don't listen to me. Ever, James replied. The casual talk still hid an undercurrent of an edge in their voices. If nothing else, the woman behind them worked for people who committed acts of industrial violence inside the United States that never made it to the public eye, and on top of that, her name was Violence. Sitting with his back to somebody like that was a tiny bit stressful for James. On that thought, Nate decided to get back to them. We're going ahead. Team 2's on alert. Frequent status updates. Team 1, stay in place. Prepare to leave if the meeting isn't a trap. James kept himself from nodding at the digital words. Roger, he sent back. While out loud, he asked Sarah, How's the salad? Hammy, she said, with an emotion James could only describe as cheerful disdain. You doing okay? Yeah, I'm fine. James answered the spoken question, as well as the unspoken, are you okay with this complication question at the same time. Also, what did you actually expect from a ham house? It's the ham house, James, Sarah reminded him. Those words had him grinning despite his worries, and he kept that smile on his face as a smartly dressed middle-aged couple walked past and into the insurance office just down one of the outdoor paths from the courtyard. He had plenty of time to catch them in the view line of the glasses, too. Jim Reese, Central Intelligence Agency, Field Support, and Kathy Balker, Central Intelligence Agency, Nobody. Sarah raised her eyebrows reflexively as she saw the same thing he did through their link. Nate, James called in silently through the skulljack, wishing that he could put more emotional inflection into the word. What are the odds the CIA needs insurance from a town of 3,000 rich old guys in Utah? 0, Nate said instantly. Anyone else? Not yet. James looked around the sad brick courtyard with its faux Roman columns and general sense of apathy seeping into the air. Just us, and the Wolfpack girl, and the CIA. Are you sure? Nate cut him off, which was impressive when they could send Skulljack messages roughly as fast as they decided to. Team 2 reports the alchemists arriving. This is turning into a mess, but we can still come out of this with everything of value that we want. Your call if we leave. It was a cruel thing to ask James, someone who, even at the best of times, would make what he knew were bad choices to avoid disappointing anyone. He tried to step back from that impulse to just agree, and rolled the decision around in his head. Then he remembered he didn't have to do that alone, because his head was shared with a dozen people in a small way right now. Karen, how do you feel about this? James asked. If we cancel now, they may not agree to another meeting for some time, if at all, Karen replied, and that is time we don't want to waste. Not what James asked. Alana's signature jumped into the conversation. You up for this? There was a pause before Karen replied, and James could imagine the woman sighing deeply. Make sure to teleport us out the instant something goes wrong, she addressed Alana publicly. But yes, I am ready. Out of the corner of his eye, James watched a trio of teenagers with thin coats and thick backpacks go by, laden down with plastic takeout bags. The glasses identified them as students at a Moth Hill High School, which he assumed must be around here somewhere. He shook his head as he nostalgically fabricated memories of a time when he, too, would have snuck off his closed campus to buy lunch, though he stopped as soon as the group of students split around a pair of men entering the courtyard. The kids sat 30 feet away, loudly chatting about which teachers they hated, while the men stopped, standing underneath the clock tower. The older one, gray hair and a charcoal suit jacket, pulled an honest-to-God gold pocket watch out of his jacket and checked the time. 2 steps behind him, his companion, who was both younger, taller, and balder than him, sporting a hooked nose and a resume of scars on his face, slowly scanned around the pavilion, eyes narrowing as he glared at the students that paid them no mind. Big bodyguard energy going on there. "They're here," Sarah sent through the link. Maximilian Hart, Alchemists Guild, Alchemist. Joey Kim, Alchemists Guild, Nobel. The thought James kept to himself was, holy shit, they actually call them Nobels on purpose. "They're late," the voice of the alchemist snapped out, making the unpleasant weather feel a little chillier. "Or are they just planning to shoot us and be done with it?" he demanded of his bodyguard. The mercenary leaned down and spoke softly into the alchemist's ear, getting a snort from the older man. "Hey, normal date stuff," Sarah muttered, reaching over and grabbing James's hand in her own, making a sappy face at him. He almost laughed. Over the link she added, "The Nobel just said neither of their watchers are snipers, and he wasn't talking about us." "Noted. Team 2 groups. Begin rotating to secondary positions. Watch for reaction," Nate commanded. "Let's not keep him waiting. Envoy arriving now." Without any other preamble, there was a small pop of displaced air, and Karen and Alana appeared about 10 feet away from the alchemist. The ornery telepads even got their facing right for that extra dramatic flourish, and without a moment of hesitation, Karen stepped forward and offered a handshake. "Good afternoon," she said, like she wasn't just someone who had teleported onto the field. "Our apologies for being slightly tardy." Karen brought an effortless calm to the interaction that James envied. Sarah made an easy show of glancing over her shoulder at where James was staring, both of them staying in character as people who weren't involved. She muttered something out loud before shrugging and turning back to pretending to have a conversation with him. James played along, trying not to think about the fact that the Nobel had twitched for a weapon when the other members of the Order had appeared, and trying really hard not to think about the risk his partner was personally in right now. "Shall we sit?" Karen offered, motioning to one of the dozen remaining empty tables. "I wouldn't want to inconvenience you." James listened through the link for a few more lines of dialogue as Karen and the alchemist, who identified himself as Euphrates, not Maximilian, went back and forth making passive-aggressive verbal snipes at each other before he realized he needed to stop focusing on that and pay attention to what he was supposed to be doing. Otherwise, he'd be helplessly snickering at Karen running verbal loops around the man for the rest of the meeting. "They seem like good friends," Sarah said out loud, listening in physically to the meeting, and doing it overtly. She said it with such earnest cheer that James was inclined to give a snort of laughter along with the Wolfpack woman who had obviously overheard them and disagreed. "Yeah-huh," James failed to agree. "So what are we doing after lunch? Got any plans?" He felt like he was getting better at the veneer of the casual, even as he kept his eyes open. We'll figure it out when we're done eating," Sarah said, while at the same time silently sending, "We should stick around for the whole thing. This shouldn't take long, right?" It probably wouldn't. This really was just a preliminary meeting to talk about future interactions. There was originally one big barrier, and now there were 2 potential problems. At first, it was just that most of this would come down to what the Order could offer the alchemists in the short term, the term they cared about with their profit motive ideology, and the answer to that was they just didn't have a lot. The Order wasn't exactly poor, and in the next few months they stood to begin bringing in truly absurd amounts of money from mass material sales. JP was already talking about messing with the commodities market, but James was pretty sure that wasn't a realistic expectation. But one alchemist had been worth almost $200 million, a number so patently absurd for a single person that James still hadn't fully grasped it. The Order of Endless Rooms didn't come in at that net worth total, though Dungeon Tech kind of skewed actual monetary value. Still, the biggest issue here that wasn't the CIA poking around was that when it came to negotiations, they were essentially offering a promise of an optimistic future in exchange for a change in behavior now. And the alchemists didn't have a lot of reasons to listen. Like Reed had said, life was pretty good for them. So, they turned to other offers: security, information, new dungeon tech to explore, things the alchemists might value over money. James wasn't sure if it would work, but, well, Karen was still talking, and the alchemist was still listening. The new problem, of course, was that the CIA was poking around, and the presence of two other groups who really weren't here by coincidence was not good. At all. James checked in on the developing plan for what to do about that. Currently, it was finish the meeting, tail everyone, see if we can pick up any good information on them. But even as he read that standing plan, something more began to go wrong. From a nearby rooftop, a message came in from Ethan, who was watching the more open space around the courtyard. Hey guys, 4 dudes with guns just got out of a camo-patterned truck and are standing around. Magic glasses say they're Utah Patriots. 2 of them are. One is a driver for a shipping company, one is a teacher at a middle school. They are all in camo, though, Simon corrected his squad mate. Nate? Looks like a newly formed right-wing militia. They don't like being called a militia. No one gives a fuck. What guns? There was a pause as Nate, new to Skulljack operations, linked into Ethan and Simon's feed to see for himself. M15s. Everyone set shields to 5.56 when they start shooting. When? James tensed up, sending and saying the word out loud at the same time. Yeah, when. These guys are going to be loud, stupid, and you're going to piss them off. Karen? Across the courtyard, Karen cut herself off mid-sentence, another comically effective power play, and raised a hand. Excuse me, she said politely, turning her head slightly to communicate with the group. They are open to negotiations. I am unsure if they have captives, but I would estimate no. Euphrates doesn't seem to know why they began their infiltration experiments either, and if nothing else, we may be able to turn him personally. In fact, I am not sure if he represents their entire organization, or a splinter faction, or perhaps just himself. He is nervous. Good, keep talking. You got 5 minutes to wrap this up. I understand. Karen turned her head back. My apologies for the interruption. Let's discuss lines of communication. James tuned them out again and cast his attention over the parking lot. The courtyard was seeing more foot traffic, and he dutifully picked out each one of them with his identification to check if they were an immediate threat. Students and the business crowd, a few contractors, nothing that stood out like the others. He tried his best to keep up with Sarah's cheerful small talk, and realized halfway through that he was probably doing a better job convincing anyone listening in that he was in an exhausting relationship rather than a healthy one. But it would still be convincing enough all the same. Then, Dave decided to deploy more bad news. Hey guys, police cars are all headed your way. All? 3 people on the link asked at once. Everyone shut up, Nate ordered, and then added, Dave? All? Yeah, like we can see 8 of them. 9, 12. Different city markings too. They're from all over. All headed up. Dave's Skulljack messages were actually a lot more in-the-moment expressive than most people's, and a second later he elaborated on the strange noise he'd made. Helicopter. Came out of nowhere. Almost hit us. Pen's fine though. Cloak is still up. James snorted out loud and felt a sudden clarity deep in his bones. He'd been trying to take a backseat to this, let other people who were more qualified make the calls. James didn't want to be the person in charge, but right now his instincts and common sense were howling at him from every direction that this was a stupid idea. Right now, he was the qualified person. "All right, that's it," he said. "I'm calling it. I want no part of this. Everyone out. Karen, wrap it up." He smiled at Sarah, speaking out loud. "Hey, you want to get out of here?" "Oh yeah," she sighed, moving to stand up. "Thought you'd never... Uh-oh." Sarah froze, her voice going quiet, one hand still pushing herself up from the table. James followed her wide-eyed line of sight to where another woman had just entered the courtyard. The figure's long gray hair, braided with what looked like small knives tied into the ends, dropping like gravity had only just caught up with it. She grinned as she stood up from her arrival point, where she had, in fact, fallen from the sky. The woman, who was old, James realized, skin stretched over bones and a bird-like face, brushed off the patchwork coat she was wearing. The glasses said nothing about her. "Euphrates!" the woman cried in a voice that sounded like an enthusiastic grandmother greeting her favorite child, the kind of voice that didn't overwhelm with volume, but that everyone always heard clearly. "Time for you to die!" "Hey, Alana, get Karen out now. This is not our problem anymore," James said, trying to keep calm. "Nate, we need..." He paused. The connection was down to Nate, half of Team 2, and everyone else as well. "Sarah?" he sent quickly. "Reading," she sent back. "Let's run." "Good call." James stood and turned, mildly alarmed that the Wolfpack girl appeared to have vanished, and found himself facing down a cobblestone path out of this mess that was currently occupied by 4 angry-looking men with angrier-looking guns. "Alchemist!" the foremost and largest of the men yelled. "You fucking gypped us! We're here to collect!" "Mr. Moyer," a soft, deadly dark voice of a man said suddenly, as one of the CIA agents stepped out of the cover of a doorway, pistol leveled at the head of the militia member. "I have some questions you are uniquely suited to answer." "Oh, absolutely fuck this," James said out loud himself, pulling out his telepad. Across the courtyard, Alana slapped a hand on Karen's shoulder and did the same. They tore their pages at the same time. Vanished. James had a brief vision of a wall of burning gray flames interlaced with thorns. Smooth, solid, entirely uninterested in offering him passage. The light and fire didn't hurt, but it did deny. The vision lasted only a brief moment, barely enough to even be sure it was real, before he smashed back into reality. Sarah reappeared with him. Across the courtyard, Alana and Karen reappeared as well, only a tiny wisp of pale gray fire following them back. "Get me out of here!" the alchemist was screaming at his bodyguard, the Nobel already moving to screen against the number of people who had apparently decided now was the time to take a run at his employer. 2 more of the mercenaries were visible rushing toward them on one of the nearby flat commercial rooftops. "No one's going anywhere. We've got questions too." James heard a young woman's voice rise over the cacophony that was building, cracking with nervous panic as she yelled. Looking past the clock tower, over to an outdoor table between a chocolatier's and a tiny art supply store, James saw the young students. One of the boys standing between the other 2, arms outstretched, a gray radiation the same color as what had cratered their telepad attempt, seeping out into the ground. The other 2 held swords and bucklers, and James instantly gave up on trying to figure out how dangerous the weapons were at a glance. With high school students these days, they could be anything from theater props to cheap crap they bought online to ancestral magic blades pulled from some underground vault prepared to smite the heavens themselves, and that last one seemed likely given how his day was going. "I feel like I might have chosen a poor time," the old woman joked with a razor-sharp grin on her kind face. Her words were mostly eaten up as the yelling began and people did what people did best. Made a chaotic fucking mess of things. Alana? James flung over their link. All good, his partner replied. Telepad failed. We need an out. We can just make a run for the parking lot. Nate's gotta notice we're cut off, Sarah said. It seems this man has some enemies. This explains why Euphrates was so nervous, Karen said, her voice only shaking a little, somehow still looking mostly unfazed by anything happening, ignoring the escalating shouting and threats of violence from just feet away from her. And also why all these people are here. I shouldn't have doubted Nate's people. They all tracked the alchemist. This could be worse, though. We can still just walk away. No one here knows who we are. James nodded, even as the yelling and threats of violence escalated. For all that half these people had brought guns, it seemed like no one wanted to be the first to fire a shot. Move toward us, he directed them. We can... Suddenly, the noise of sirens cut in. James whipped his head around to see the thin membrane of gray peel back, like the parking lot was separated from them by an unnoticed wall. Whatever the thing the kid was doing to keep them from teleporting, it didn't seem to stop people coming in, and the noise of a half-dozen different police and sheriff cars pulling up horizontal to the curb was enough to get some attention. "Oh good! The police are here!" James yelled sarcastically, spreading his arms. And then James realized something. This was it. This was exactly where he wanted to be. There were 5 different groups in play, all of them mad at each other, and not him. Half of them had magic. One of them was some kind of immortal wizard that looked a bit like his grandma, and he felt like he was prepared. That calm rush of cool understanding came back to him. Through his link, he compiled and shared a relative map of where everyone was and what their likely tactical objectives were. Get Karen out first. Keep the kids safe. Kneecap that militia if possible, just for fun. Get out alive. Grab anything that looked even remotely magical or useful. This wasn't a disaster. This was an opportunity. For that moment, he saw the world as Nate must have. Risky, yes, a gamble, but a risk that could catapult the Order's strength forward. And looking at all these people here, all these players in the game, they might need that strength sooner rather than later. Then, just as Sarah was ducking behind a brick column and Alana was slyly handing Karen a backup shield bracer where they were crouched behind a row of bushes, James saw the other CIA agent raise her gun and shoot her partner in the back from through the window of the insurance office. The gunshot and the breaking of glass silenced everything for half a second. And then all hell broke loose.